Gray morning light filtered through the narrow bar window of Bayview State Prison. Ethan Cole lay on his cold metal cot, his eyes locked on the clock on the wall. 6 a.m. In just 3 hours, a lethal injection would end his life. After 5 years of failed appeals and shouting his innocence to anyone who would listen, the world had given up on him. But Ethan clung to one last desperate hope, to see his dog Scout one final time. The sound of steady footsteps broke the silence. Warden Victoria Hayes appeared at his cell bars, her face stern. "Cole," she said, her voice all business. "It's time for final requests." Ethan's voice was rough from lack of use. "Please, Warden, let me see Scout one last time." The simple request hung in the air. "Your dog." Hayes replied. For a second, her professional mask slipped, and something like understanding flickered in her eyes. Ethan leaned forward, urgency in his tone. "He saved me after I came back from the war. He kept me grounded. I need to say goodbye." The warden paused, studying his face. Then, with a small nod, she agreed. "I'll call Miss Jenkins." As her footsteps faded away, Ethan closed his eyes. A single tear escaped. He didn't know it then, but this simple wish to see his faithful dog would start a chain of events that exposed lies, corruption, and the real truth about the night a man was killed. Before prison, Ethan was a respected Marine. He was strong, a leader his team could count on. Now, at 37, his shoulders sagged under the weight of a crime he didn't commit. The years in prison had worn him down, but deep inside, a core of the man he once was still remained. Back in his old life, Ethan worked as a security expert in the coastal town of Riverton. His combat experience made him valuable to wealthy clients, but the war had left him with invisible scars, terrifying nightmares that jolted him awake at night. His anchor through those dark times was Scout, a Belgian Malinois who was more than a pet. He was a silent therapist, a steady friend. Scout was no ordinary dog. At 9 years old, he had intelligent hazel eyes that seemed to understand everything. A jagged scar across his snout, a mark from the day he heroically saved a child from a burning cabin. That brave act was mostly forgotten, and Scout was left at an animal shelter, seen as too damaged and scary to adopt. But when Ethan saw him, he didn't see a damaged dog. He saw a fellow survivor. Adopting Scout that day was the best decision he ever made. Sarah Jenkins was at the shelter that day, a warm and dedicated school teacher. She fell for both Ethan and his new dog instantly. Their relationship grew quickly, leading to a happy engagement surrounded by friends and family, with Scout weaving through the celebration. It was a bright, hopeful time, just days before the brutal murder of a powerful land developer, Reginald Hawthorne, a crime that would tear their lives apart. Detective Marcus Kane was the officer who built the case against Ethan. With decades of experience, he presented what seemed like undeniable proof. A partial fingerprint, a witness who heard Ethan argue with Hawthorne, and a suspicious money transfer. The case seemed airtight. The jury agreed. But now, on the morning of Ethan's execution, Detective Kane couldn't sleep. A nagging doubt had taken root. Had he missed something? Had he been so sure of Ethan's guilt that he overlooked a crucial piece of the puzzle? The sharp ring of the phone pulled Sarah from a fitful sleep. She had been dreaming of Ethan, the vibrant man she loved, not the drained prisoner she visited. Her hand shook as she picked up the receiver. "Ms. Jenkins," a formal voice said. "This is Warden Hayes from Bayview State. Ethan Cole has requested to see his dog before the procedure." Sarah's throat tightened. "Yes," she whispered. "Scout is with me." "This is highly unusual," the warden admitted. "But given the circumstances, if you can bring the dog here within 2 hours, we will allow a short, supervised visit." After hanging up, Sarah sat on the edge of her bed, frozen. Silent tears traced paths down her cheeks. She looked at a faded photo on her nightstand. Ethan crouched beside Scout on the day they adopted him, both of them beaming with a joy that now felt a world away. She walked to the den where Scout slept on his worn mat. At 9 years old, his muzzle had gone gray, and a stiffness had slowed his once powerful gait. The vet's sad diagnosis from last month echoed in her mind. Tumors. Maybe 6 months left, if we're lucky. She had never told Ethan. It would have been too cruel. Scout lifted his head as she approached, his soulful eyes asking a silent question. Did he sense that this day was different? Sarah knelt beside him, running her fingers through his thick fur. "We're going to see Ethan today, boy," she murmured, her voice cracking. Scout's ears shot forward at the sound of his master's name. A spark of recognition lit his eyes. Even after 5 long years, he still looked at every opening door with hope. Across town, Detective Marcus Kane paced his cluttered study. The clock read 5:30 a.m., but sleep had been impossible. At 58, with decades of experience, his instincts were screaming. The Ethan Cole case, his proudest conviction, now felt wrong. It was like a persistent itch he couldn't scratch. With the execution just hours away, he kept returning to a faded ledger from the precinct archives. One line in particular jumped out, a note about unidentified partial prints at the Hawthorne crime scene. Prints that never made it to trial. Next to it, in red ink that wasn't his handwriting, was the word inconclusive. "Inconclusive, my foot," Kane muttered, grabbing his phone. He dialed the forensics lab. "I need answers on the Hawthorne case. Now." Something was terribly wrong, and time was running out. Back at the prison, Ethan sat in his cell. Pastor Daniel Wright sat quietly beside him, a calming presence. "Do dogs go to heaven, Pastor?" Ethan asked suddenly, his voice low. Wright smiled gently. "A loyal heart like Scout's? I believe God has a special place for that." Ethan nodded, memories flooding back. "He saved me, you know. After the war, when the nightmares came, he was always there. He anchored me." At 7:45 a.m., Sarah's car pulled into the prison lot. Scout sat upright in the passenger seat. As they approached the grim building, he grew alert, his hazel eyes scanning everything. He sensed something. Warden Hayes met them at the gate. "He's safe?" she asked, eyeing the large, scarred dog. "Absolutely," Sarah said, her hand steady on Scout's leash. They were led through a maze of clanging gates. Scout walked calmly, but his nose twitched, searching the air. He was looking for Ethan. Sarah paused outside a heavy door. Through the window, she saw Ethan, pale and thin in his orange jumpsuit. Her heart ached. "Ready?" the warden asked softly. Sarah nodded. The moment the door opened, Scout froze. His eyes locked on Ethan. Then, with a raw, emotional whimper, he surged forward, pulling the leash from Sarah's grasp. He crossed the room in a bound, slamming into Ethan's chest. "Hey, friend." Ethan choked out, his arms wrapping around the dog, burying his face in Scout's fur. "My good boy." Scout trembled, licking Ethan's face frantically, his tail wagging wildly. He whined and pressed close, as if making sure Ethan was real. Sarah watched, tears streaming down her face. "He remembers you," she whispered. "He waits by the door for you every day." For a beautiful, painful moment, they were just a man and his dog, reunited. Then Scout suddenly stilled. He began pawing at Ethan's jumpsuit pocket, whining urgently. "What's he doing?" Warden Hayes asked, stepping closer. Ethan, puzzled, reached into the pocket and pulled out a small, tattered scrap of cloth. "It's from my old coat. They let me keep it." Scout's reaction was intense. He quivered, his eyes fixed on the rag, then looked frantically between Ethan and Sarah. "He's trying to tell us something," Sarah said, her heart pounding. Before anyone could react, the door swung open. A guard stood there, his expression urgent. "Warden, Detective Kane is here. He says it's urgent about Cole's case." As Hayes turned to leave, Scout let out a low growl, not at the people, but triggered by the scent on the cloth, a memory from a night long ago. In the warden's office, Kane slapped a stack of papers on her desk. "Look at this," he said, his voice tight. "Cell tower records from a burner phone linked to Derek Vance. It places him near Hawthorne's loft the night of the murder." Warden Hayes scanned the documents. Derek Vance? His name never came up at trial. "Exactly," Kane said, "because someone buried it. Vance is a fixer for the rich and powerful. He vanished right after Cole was convicted." Hayes glanced toward the visitation room. "This better be solid, Detective." 30 years on the force," Kane replied, his eyes hard. "I don't chase ghosts. Not when a man's life is on the line." Back in the visitation room, Sarah knelt beside Ethan, her hand on his. Scout pressed close against them. "I have to tell you something," Sarah whispered. She guided Ethan's hand to her abdomen. "I'm pregnant. With twins. They're yours." A wave of stunning joy and crushing sorrow washed over Ethan's face. "Ours," he breathed, his voice breaking. The miracle of new life made the thought of his death even more devastating. Scout let out a soft yip and nudged them, as if he understood. The door opened again. Warden Hayes stood there, her expression unreadable. "Mr. Cole," she said, "there's new information. I've spoken with the state's head counsel." Ethan looked at her, barely daring to hope. "What information?" "Detective Kane uncovered call records suggesting someone else was at the crime scene that night. It's enough for a temporary stay." "A stay?" Sarah asked, her voice trembling. "For how long?" "2 hours. Until 11 a.m., Hayes said. If stronger evidence emerges, we can extend it." Hope, a dangerous, fragile thing Ethan had long suppressed, flickered a life in his chest. Scout sensed a shift. His ears perked up and his intelligent eyes darted to the door, as if he knew the fight wasn't over yet. The clock in Warden Hayes' office ticked loudly toward 8:52 a.m. Detective Kane stood over her desk, the buzz of the fluorescent lights matching the tension in the room. "Forensics confirmed it," Kane said, his phone pressed his ear. "Powder residue at the scene that doesn't match a stabbing. The report was buried." He listened, his jaw tightening. "And Deputy Prosecutor Thorpe signed off on hiding it." "Send everything. Now!" He hung up and turned to Hayes. "Thorpe suppressed evidence. The residue suggests a different weapon was involved." Down the hall, in the Stark visitation room, Ethan held Scout close. The dog's warmth was the only real thing in a world of cold procedure. Sarah knelt beside them, her hand in his. "The night of the murder," Sarah said, her voice urgent with new realization. "Scout was obsessed with your coat. What if he smelled something on it? Something from the crime scene." "But I wasn't there," Ethan insisted, confused. "Someone could have planted it," she pressed, "while your truck was parked at your client's office." As if on cue, Scout nudged Ethan's hand, his hazel eyes intent, repeating his strange behavior from 5 years ago. The door swung open, and Deputy Prosecutor Daniel Thorpe stormed in, his expensive suit and polished demeanor a stark contrast to the grim surroundings. "This is a breach of protocol, Hayes," he declared. "Last-minute theatrics won't overturn a 5-year-old verdict." Kane didn't flinch. "Hello, Dan. You got here fast. Almost like you were expecting trouble." He held up a document. "Care to explain why you had powder residue reports removed from the evidence file?" Thorpe's eye twitched. "Minor inconsistencies happen. It wasn't relevant compared to the fingerprint and motive. The judge decides what's relevant." Kane shot back. "Not you." Warden Hayes stepped between them, her voice firm. "The state's counsel has granted a 2-hour stay to review this new evidence." The clock struck 9 a.m. Ethan's original execution time passed in a moment of surreal silence. In the visitation room, the reprieve felt fragile. "Don't let hope hurt you again," Ethan murmured to Sarah. Suddenly, Scout pawed at Ethan's jumpsuit again, whining. Pastor Wright, who had just entered, watched closely. "Detective Kane is asking about the coat you wore that night, Ethan." "My leather coat? The police took it as evidence the morning after my arrest." "Scout did this that night, too," Sarah said, her thoughts racing. "He was frantic about it. I had to put away to calm him down." Ethan looked down at Scout, who was now staring at him with an almost human intensity. "What did you know, boy?" he whispered. "What were you trying to tell me?" Outside the prison, a crowd had gathered. News vans lined the street. The delay of an execution was big news. Back in Hayes' office, Kane's phone buzzed. He listened, his expression shifting to grim satisfaction. "You're sure?" The watch was signed out by Thorpe. He hung up and faced the room. Hawthorne's Patek Philippe watch was removed from evidence 3 days after the murder. Thorpe's signature is on the chain of custody form. Hayes was stunned. The prosecutor tampered with evidence? "And there's more," Kane said. "They tested Ethan's old coat from storage. There are traces of a specialized cleaning solution on the sleeve, the kind used to scrub away DNA. The revelation hung in the air. Someone had not only planted evidence, but had also tried to clean the scene, and Scout had detected the foreign scent on his master's coat that very night. The wall clock showed 10:59 a.m. 1 minute left. Warden Hayes' phone rang. Everyone froze. She answered, listened, and then gave a single, sharp nod. "They've granted a 48-hour stay," she announced, "pending an emergency hearing." Relief washed over Ethan so powerfully his legs felt weak. He sank to his knees and pulled Scout into a tight embrace, burying his face in the dog's fur. Scout licked his face, a soft, contented sound rumbling in his chest. The race was still on, but for the first time the heavy door to the visitation room clicked shut, leaving Ethan, Sarah, and Scout in a bubble of tense silence. The air was thick with unspoken questions. "I remember that night so clearly now," Sarah said, her voice low and urgent. She rested a hand on Scout's back. "He wasn't just being playful with your coat. He was desperate. What if he smelled the killer scent on it? Or some chemical from the crime scene?" Ethan shook his head, trying to piece it together. "But how?" "I was at a client's office until 10 p.m. I went straight home." "Your truck was parked there for hours," Sarah insisted. "What if someone planted evidence on your coat while you were inside?" Scout, hearing the intensity in their voices, let out a soft whine and pawed at Ethan's leg, mirroring his behavior from years ago. Meanwhile, across town, Deputy Prosecutor Daniel Thorpe sat in his car, phone pressed to his ear, his voice a panic whisper. "The execution has to happen. Kane is digging up old ghosts." His ambition was crumbling, and the fear was palpable. Back in the prison, Detective Kane burst into the room, holding a crime scene photo. He slapped it on the table. "The watch, Ethan. Tell me about Hawthorne's Patek Philippe." Ethan leaned forward. He loved that watch, kept in a safe. It wouldn't just be lying broken on the floor unless someone put it there. Scout immediately trotted over to the table. He sniffed the photo, then began pawing at it with the same focused urgency he'd shown with the coat scrap. "He's doing it again," Sarah said, her eyes wide, "just like with the cloth." Kane watched, fascinated. "What's the connection?" "Maybe he's recognizing a scent," Sarah suggested. "From the watch or from whoever handled it." Kane's phone rang. He answered, and his expression hardened into one of cold triumph. "That was the lab," he announced. Hanging up, they confirmed Thorpe personally signed out Hawthorne's watch from the evidence locker 3 days after murder. It was never returned. Ethan stared, the betrayal sinking in. "The prosecutor framed me?" "And there's more," Kane continued. "The test results on your coat came back. They found traces of a powerful cleaning solution, the kind used to erase DNA evidence from a scene." The pieces snapped together. Someone had not only planted the watch pin, but had also tried to clean the real crime scene, transferring traces of that cleaner onto Ethan's coat. Scout, with his incredible nose, had detected the foreign, dangerous scent that very night and had tried to warn them. The wall clock showed 10:59 a.m. 1 minute until the temporary stay expired. Warden Hayes stood by the door, her face unreadable. "The stay expires in 60 seconds. No one breathed. Then her phone rang. She answered, listened for a moment, and then gave a sharp nod. "The 48-hour stay is confirmed," she announced. "We have an emergency hearing." Relief washed over the room. Ethan pulled Sarah into a hug, then dropped to his knees and wrapped his arms around Scout. "You knew," he whispered into the dog's fur. "You tried to tell us all along." Scout licked his face, his tail thumping weakly against the floor. The first major battle was won, but in a quiet corner of a dim cafe, Detective Kane sat across from Edward Collins, Reginald Hawthorne's former aide. The man was nervous, his hands shaking as he stirred his coffee. "I always knew Ethan Cole was innocent," Collins whispered, glancing around. "Mr. Hawthorne respected him." He slid his phone across the table. A photo of his grandchildren playing in their yard filled the screen. Below it, a threatening message. "Silence is safety." "Who sent this?" Kane asked. "I don't know. A blocked number." But a week before he died, Mr. Hawthorne was preparing to expose the Bayfront development. Bribes, fake reports, everything. The files vanished the night he was killed. Did Ethan know about these files? No, but Hawthorne had asked him to upgrade his security. He was worried someone was watching him. Did Derek Vance have access? Collins nodded. He was a specialist. They argued. Hawthorne shouted about not crossing that line. The picture was becoming clear. Hawthorne was a whistleblower, Vance was a cleaner, and Ethan was the perfect patsy. Meanwhile, at Sarah's cottage, she searched through Ethan's old belongings. Scout followed her, sniffing half-heartedly until his behavior suddenly changed. He began pawing excitedly at an old gym bag tucked under the bed. "What is it, boy?" Sarah asked, pulling out the faded duffel bag. Scout whined urgently, scratching at the bag's base. Sarah emptied it, finding nothing but old workout clothes. Then her fingers found a small tear in the lining. She reached inside and pulled out a tiny gold object. It was a broken watch pin. "Oh my God," she breathed, hugging Scout. "You brilliant dog." She immediately called Kane. "Detective, I found something. I think Scout just solved the case." The missing piece of the puzzle, the evidence that could prove the watch was planted, had been hidden in Ethan's bag all along. Found by the dog 2 days later, the Riverton courthouse was buzzing. Reporters crowded the steps. Inside courtroom 3B, Judge Lydia Monroe, known for her fairness, called the session to order. "This court recognizes the gravity of today," she announced. "A man's life hangs in the balance. We will proceed with truth and diligence." Ethan entered, wearing a simple suit. His eyes found Sarah in the front row, and beside her, by special permission, sat Scout. The dog was calm, his intelligent eyes taking in the scene. Defense attorney Robert Klein stood. "Your Honor, we move to vacate the conviction based on new evidence of conspiracy and prosecutorial misconduct." He presented the phone records placing Derek Vance at the scene, the financial records of the Bayfront corruption, and the buried forensic report. Deputy Prosecutor Thorpe objected. "This is a fishing expedition, Your Honor." "Sit down, Mr. Thorpe," Judge Monroe said coolly. "When a life is at stake, there is no 11th hour. Proceed, Counselor." Klein then called Sarah to the stand. She described Scout's behavior the night of the murder, his fixation on Ethan's coat, his agitation. "And just 2 days ago," she said, pointing to an evidence bag, "Scout led me to this." It was a broken watch pin, matching the one missing from Hawthorne's Patek Philippe. The courtroom murmured. Scout, hearing his name, perked up his ears but remained seated. Next, Detective Kane took the stand. He detailed his reinvestigation, the suppressed evidence, the connection to Derek Vance, and the conspiracy to frame Ethan because Hawthorne was about to expose their corruption. Thorpe's cross-examination was desperate. "Detective, you built the original case. Why should we trust your sudden change of heart?" "Because I was wrong," Kane stated, his voice firm. "And when I discovered injustice, I worked to correct it." Finally, the defense called Derek Vance. The courtroom gasped as the polished fixer was escorted in. After a tense silence, and under the promise of a deal, Vance spoke. "I was hired to silence Reginald Hawthorne and retrieve incriminating files," he said flatly. "I was hired by a consortium, Victor Lang, Samuel Drake, and Judge Harlan Brooks." The room erupted. The very judge who had presided over Ethan's trial was part conspiracy. Vance continued. "Ethan Cole was a convenient scapegoat. I planted the watch pin in his gym bag and transferred trace evidence to his coat. When his dog reacted to the scent, I knew it was a problem, but I never thought he'd lead them to the pin years later. The truth was out. The corruption went to the highest levels." Judge Monroe silenced the room. "Mr. Cole, please rise." Ethan stood, his legs unsteady. "Based on substantial and compelling new evidence," Judge Monroe declared, "this court finds that your conviction was secured to misconduct, tampering, and a criminal conspiracy." Her voice softened. "On behalf of the court, I offer my profound apology." She struck her gavel. "I hereby vacate your conviction and order your immediate release. Mr. Cole, you are free to go." The courtroom exploded into noise. Sarah rushed forward as bailiffs moved to detain Thorpe. Ethan met her in the aisle, and they embraced, a united front after years of separation. Then, Scout pushed his way between them, his joyful barks cutting through chaos. Ethan knelt and wrapped his arms around his dog, the loyal friend who never gave up on him. "Let's go home," Ethan whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "All of us." As they walked out of the courthouse into the sunlight, Scout leading the way with his head held high, it was clear that 3 days after his release, Ethan's small home was filled with a quiet celebration. Friends had gathered, but Ethan moved through the rooms like a man in a dream. He kept touching things, the fabric of the armchair, the kitchen counter, Scout's fur, as it confirmed they were real. "You holding up okay?" Sarah asked, appearing at his side with gentle touch. "Still adjusting," Ethan admitted, his voice quiet. "I keep waiting for a guard to say time's up." "It's real," she said, squeezing his hand. "You're home. For good." Scout hadn't left his side since they returned. The dog followed him so closely that Ethan had accidentally stepped on his paws more than once. But now, Ethan noticed something else. Scout's steps were slower. His breathing seemed heavier. The vibrant energy from the prison reunion was fading. Later, as the sun set, they sat together on the porch swing. The sound of the ocean waves was a peaceful rhythm after years of prison silence. "There's something I need to tell you," Sarah said, her voice soft but serious. Ethan looked at her, a flicker of worry in his eyes. "What is it?" She took his hand and placed it on her abdomen. "I'm 12 weeks pregnant. We're having twins." Joy, pure and stunning, washed over Ethan's face. He leaned forward and kissed her, a smile breaking through. "Twins," he whispered in awe. "A new beginning." But Sarah's smile wavered. "There's more, Ethan, about Scout." The dog looked up at the sound of his name. "He started getting sick after you were taken," she said, her voice trembling. "The vet found cancer last year. It's advanced. They gave him 6 months, at best. That was 4 months ago." The words hit Ethan like a physical blow. He slid from the swing to his knees, cradling Scout's face in his hands. Now he really looked past the joy and saw the signs, the duller eyes, the prominent ribs, the labored breathing. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked, his voice cracking. "You were fighting for your life," Sarah said, kneeling beside him. "I couldn't add that pain." Scout whined softly and licked Ethan's wrist, comforting his master even in the face of his own illness. The dog who had waited so faithfully now had his own battle, and time was the one enemy they couldn't defeat in court. Detective Kane found them like that, a small, heartbroken circle on the porch. "I'm so sorry," he said, his gruff voice softened with genuine sympathy. "If there's anything I can do, any resources, you just say the word." But as night fell, the only thing anyone could do was be together. Ethan sat on the floor with Scout, whispering thanks and promises into the dog's ear. The gentle celebration in the small cottage continued, but new, quiet sorrow hung in the air. Nathan, now referred to by his correct name, Ethan, moved through familiar rooms, each ordinary moment a precious gift. He savored the feel of his own home, the sound of the sea, the warmth of Scout pressed against his leg. But Scout's presence was different now. The dog's loyalty was as fierce as ever, but his body was failing. His breathing was labored, and he winced slightly when he lay down. On the porch, as the evening settled, Ethan and Sarah sat in silence for a moment, watching the waves. "It's a boy and a girl," Sarah said softly, her hand on her belly. "The early scans are sure." Ethan smiled, a true, deep smile that reached his eyes. "Twins," he breathed. Then his gaze fell on Scout, who lay at his feet, ribs too visible. "And he's sick," Ethan said, the word a statement, not a question. Sarah's eyes filled with fresh tears. "The cancer is advanced. I'm so sorry I didn't tell you." Ethan slid from his chair to the porch floor, ignoring the hardwood. He gathered Scout's head into his lap, stroking the scar muzzle. "You carried this alone, boy? All this time?" Scout looked up at him, his hazel eyes clouded with age and pain, but still full of love. He gave a weak thump at his tail on the floorboards. "Why?" Ethan asked, his voice thick. "Why didn't you tell me?" You were fighting for your life, Sarah repeated, her voice breaking. I couldn't pile more onto you. It would have been too cruel. Detective Kane stepped onto the porch then, stopping short when he saw them. I should come back, he said quietly. No, Ethan said, looking up. It's okay. What is it? An update, Kane said, his voice low and respectful. Vance's testimony is dismantling the whole conspiracy. More arrests are coming. It's justice. Good, Ethan said, but the word was hollow. His world had shrunk to the ailing dog in his lap. Kane's eyes softened as he looked at Scout. If there's anything, any specialist, any cost. Ethan just nodded, unable to speak past a lump in his throat. After Kane left, Ethan stayed on the floor with Scout as the stars came out. Later, when Sarah had gone to bed, Ethan sat in the living room with Scout, who slept fitfully on his mat. Each twitch, each soft whine, felt like a knife in Ethan's heart. You held on for me, didn't you? Ethan whispered into the quiet room, his hand never stopping its gentle stroke along Scout's back. You waited until I came home. Scout's tail gave the faintest, weakest wag in his sleep. It was an answer. It was a goodbye. And it was the start of Ethan's new fight. Not for his own. 3 weeks after Ethan's release, the corruption scandal dominated the news. The men who framed him were being arrested, but Ethan barely noticed. His world had narrowed to Scout's bedside. The once powerful Belgian Malinois was now painfully thin. His breathing was labored, his movement slow. Is there anything more we can try? Ethan asked Dr. Morrow, their local vet, his voice tight with desperation. Money doesn't matter. I'll use every penny of the compensation. Dr. Morrow examined Scout carefully. There's an experimental immunotherapy program at Cornell, she said. It's a long shot, especially at this stage, but it's an option. We'll do it, Ethan said without hesitation. That afternoon, Detective Kane drove them to the airport, carefully helping lift Scout into a specially padded travel crate. During the flight, Ethan sat on the floor beside the crate, his fingers through the mesh, staying connected to his dog. At Cornell, Dr. Samantha Ruiz, the lead specialist, was blunt but hopeful. The cancer is widespread, she explained, but Scout's resilience is remarkable. Then she showed them an X-ray. We found something else, a small metal shard in his stomach lining. Ethan stared, then understood. The watch pin, he breathed. He didn't just find it. He swallowed it to hide it. Dr. Ruiz nodded. We should remove it, for his comfort, and because it's still evidence. The surgery was successful. The pin, the final piece of evidence that proved the frame-up, was carefully extracted. Scout began immunotherapy immediately. For days they waited. Ethan barely left Scout's side. Then Dr. Ruiz called him in for results. The main tumors have shrunk by 5%, she said, showing them the scans. It's a small but significant response. Can he beat this? Laura asked, her voice trembling with hope. Dr. Ruiz was honest. A full recovery is impossible, but remission is. He could have months, maybe more, of good quality life. That night, Ethan sat with Scout in the hospital garden. The dog rested his head in Ethan's lap, his breathing easier than it had been in weeks. Not done yet, are you, boy? Ethan whispered, stroking Scout's muzzle. Scout's tail thumped softly against the grass. It wasn't a miracle, but it was time, precious, borrowed time that 1 month later. Ethan stood on the balcony of their new seaside home, watching the dawn paint the sky. The sound of the waves and the scent of salt air were gifts he'd never take for granted. Scout stood beside him, steadier now, his eyes clearer. The experimental treatment was working. Later that morning, their backyard filled with friends and a few reporters. It was a day for recognition, for closing a painful chapter. Detective Kane was there, and even Warden Hayes had come. The guest of honor was Scout. He sat calmly, a new blue bandana around his neck, seeming to understand the importance of the day. When Governor Elias Grant arrived, a hush fell over the crowd. He walked directly to Ethan, his expression sincere. Mr. Brooks, the governor said, his voice carrying. On behalf of the state, I offer my deepest apology. The system failed you. He then turned to Scout. And today, by special order, I am honored to award this brave dog the Governor's Medal of Valor." He knelt and gently placed a medal around Scout's neck. Cameras flashed, capturing the scarred dog and the man he saved. The governor who had nearly signed Ethan's death warrant was now honoring the dog who made that signature unnecessary. After the ceremony, Dr. Ruiz gave him the final update. "His latest scans are stable," she told Ethan and Sarah. "The tumors aren't growing. He has time. Good time." As the sun began to set, Ethan took Scout for a walk on the beach. He unclipped the leash. "You're free, boy," he said softly. Scout didn't run like he used to. Instead, he walked with a dignified pace along the water's edge, sniffing the air, his metal glinting in the golden light. Ethan watched him, his heart full. The truth had set him free, but it was Scout's loyalty that Ethan's story is a testament to a loyalty that outlasts even the deepest injustice. Wrongly condemned, he faced death. But Scout held the truth, a secret kept close for 5 long years. When the world saw a guilty man, Scout saw only his friend. Now, Ethan walks free along the shore with Sarah and Scout, their future bright with the promise of twins. The same governor who once neared signing his death order now honors a dog who proved his innocence. In a world where truth can be bent and justice can be bought, some bonds never break. Scout's love, carried on 4 steady paws, speaks a language deeper than words, a language of faith that never faltered, and a truth that finally set them both free.